Right, good evening, students. I hope every one of you are fine. Yesterday, Delhi received its longest rainfall. It was for the longest period of time. It was raining almost the entire night and almost half of the day. Those who are living in Delhi must be knowing this. So, today is the last portion of geomorphology, which we will be doing, and then we will be starting climatology. As I had told you yesterday, there cannot be a better time to study climatology than this time, because the monsoon is going on, and the monsoon is the most prominent phenomena when it comes to the Indian climate. Okay, last time I was just asking you, is the voice and the video both completely clear to everybody? All right, all right, thank you so much. All right, so we'll just start now. Yesterday, we completed our glacial cycle. I hope you remember the glacial cycle, in which we understood how glaciers play important role in making different landforms. Right now, we are doing the chapter of NCERT class 11, which is landforms. Within landforms, we have done within landforms, we have to do 5 agents which result in the formation. Uh, 4 are particularly related to water, and 1 is both wind and water, but mostly wind. So I have done my fluvial cycle, I have done my karst cycle, I have done my glacial cycle, and today I will complete the waves, or the coastal topography, as I can call it, along with aeolian or arid areas and their corresponding landforms. So this will be my agenda today, completing these two. And if time permits, we'll start the introduction of climatology. Now, before starting this topic, I need to tell you that you will, next week, whenever we'll be having geography class, I want you to revise the entire geomorphology which we have done so far from your NCERT, and the notes, the slides which I have provided you, which you receive in the PDF form. We will be discussing all the previous year questions which have been asked in UPSC or other state PCS which can be asked in UPSC. See, sometimes the questions which are in state PCS are also of the standards that something similar or in a twisted language or in a different way, that concept can be asked directly in your UPSC. So we'll be doing all the previous year papers. Plus, you will also get a small 15 to 20 questions test. There's no point proceeding forward if you're not clear about what you've read so far. So you will be having a short test also. It will be MCQ based, and you will be getting 2 mains level questions which will be comprehensive in nature, which is not MCQ, which is comprehensive in nature. So next week, be prepared for that. You will receive your both the test on your first class of geography whenever we'll start. It will be completely related to geomorphology, the topics which we have done, the first initial units, which will be your interior of earth, volcanism, earthquake, plate tectonic activities, different landforms, mountain building, types of plateaus, plains, all of that. And then we'll proceed forward with climatology. Again, I'm telling you, geomorphology and climatology, if you do them very properly, if your concepts are clear, your geography is almost complete. In fact, these are the basis of your geography. Do not go too deep until and unless you want to prepare for your optional from the subject, but you have to understand the kind of questions which are asked, because the problem with geography is you can keep on reading the same topic from n number of sources and there'll be no end to it. The idea is, if I'm having 15 to 20 questions in my prelims from this subject, and out of that, map marking comprises of some 7 to 8 questions, then I have to understand that in order to prepare 8 to 10 questions, how much effort I have to put in the subject, because you have limited time frame to prepare a lot of subjects, and that ways you have to manage everything. Also these days there is a combination of current affairs element with every subject, including history also, which is the trend from last 5 to 6 years. So how do I incorporate my current affairs in my geography? It is simple. If there is an event that is going on in a particular area, then I can relate it to the map marking. I can see the important rivers or physical features which are found in that area, or if that area is known for any particular resources, or that area has some history of, let's say, natural disaster or catastrophe. That ways my current affairs also aid in preparing for my geography MCQs for my prelims, especially my prelims. In your mains you generally get the traditional kind of questions. In your mains you don't mostly get very current affairs sort of questions. Sometimes, yeah, if there is a debate, then see, the thing is with geography and environment there is a very fine line. In fact, they are correlated subjects. So I'll give you an example. In 2013 mains, which you got a question on urban heat islands. Now, does anybody know what do you mean by urban heat islands? Now, you were getting these questions. You were getting these questions because the RERA outline guidelines were out. RERA is the guideline based on which now the new construction or the new societies need to be made, in which there has to be a separate area which is for recreation, a separate area which will have tree plantation, etc. You cannot just build concrete structures throughout the property. Very good. I got a question from Tushar, answer from Tushar, which is concrete construction. Yeah, something like that. Urban heat island, you have to understand 2012 was very important year when it comes to climate related talks. Whenever you will be doing your environment, you will have the chronology on climate related decisions which took place. Yes, Santosh also has given me a very good answer. Uh, Yes, Santosh, that is absolutely correct. So, during 2012, there was a lot of question, a lot of buzz, and a lot of talks about the climate-related issues. And then there came the concept that the cities have converted into urban heat islands, which is nothing but the jungle of concrete. The jungle of concrete, and because of this, there is absolutely no green cover or no way out. Even like these days you will see, it is not that there is too much rainfall in Delhi. No, it is not. Delhi does not fall in the area which receives excessive rainfall. In fact, Delhi, Haryana and Punjab, imagine if there were no rivers in this area, this area would have been a semi desert or a desert. It is not, it does not fall in the category of high or excessive rainfall region. But still, whenever there is rainfall, you have buses डूब जाती हैं हमारे यहाँ. The buses, they drown in the roads of Delhi. Why? Because there is this jungle of concrete. There is no way for the water. Of course, the drainage system is also responsible. The urban planning is also responsible. But apart from that, there is no cushion, or there is no natural soil cover where this water can get absorbed, and also it has resulted in depleting water table and other issues. So this is what I'm trying to say, just to bring your attention to the kind of questions which are asked. If I'm talking about mains, they'll be mostly traditional, but sometimes they will be somewhat related to the talks that are around. So if you're regular with your newspaper, I don't think that will be a problem. For your prelims, of course, you have to keep your eyes and ears open for anything which is new or which is related to your subject. Now, coming to the topic which is at hand, today I will be understanding marine landforms or my coastal landforms. Marine landforms or coastal landforms which correspond to the wave action of sea. And you see, whenever you go to the beachside area, now I don't expect everyone, but if any chance you have been to both Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats, you would notice, even if you have not been to Western Ghats, or if you've not been to beaches, movies may, we have seen Mumbai, we have seen the Marine Drive area of Mumbai, right? In the Marine Drive area of Mumbai, you see there are rocks. There is no smooth, outlet, or there is no smooth beach kind of area throughout the coast of Mumbai. In fact, yeah, you can say Juhu beach is there, other beaches are there, but at the same time there is a rocky area also, which is directly exposed to sea, and which is intermingled with such small beaches. All I'm trying to say is there are two types of coast. Before starting the whole marine landform system, I need to understand the kind of coasts that are present, and what kind of effect these waves, tides, and currents have on these coasts, and what kind of landforms do they form. So here, now what are the types of coasts here? They are submerged coast and immersed coast. What do I understand by submerged coast? Now imagine Marine Drive area. It is high. It is a rocky coast. It is comparatively high. It is rocky. It does not have very smooth or gentle sloping. That is called a submerged coast. While the immersed coast, now imagine the Eastern Ghats. Imagine your Chennai beaches. Imagine your Kolkata beaches. They are low. They are smooth. They are gently sloping areas. It is the kind of course that also uh, results, or which also is the deciding factor in the kind of landform which will be produced. See here, this is an emergent coast. Now you have to understand, when the sea level is here, it will smoothen out this surface. As you can see, there are no, this is submergent coast, this is emergent coast. In submergent coast, you have these rocky structures, you have these cliff and bay formation. We'll be understanding how cliff and bay formation is there. While in emergent coast, it is mostly smooth. See, there is a smooth submergence, and when the water recedes, when there is a low tide, this is, this is the area which get exposed. This is called the wave cut beach. You'll be understanding all these terms in the coming slides. Just keep this in mind. This is how my emergent coast looks. It is very smooth. It does not have very cliff like or mountain like, or structures. It is comparatively even, and it is more smooth. It is known for its vast beaches. Emergent coasts are known for their vast beaches, whereas the submergent coasts, they are known for their cliff formations. Cliff is not a mountain exactly, but just in order to remember or make a picture, they appear to be like mountains, right? Cliffs or capes. You would have heard of capes. There are many famous capes: Cape of Good Hope, Cape Horn. These are capes, right? And this inundated area, these are bays. So we'll be understanding cape and bay topography also. So just keep this picture in mind. We'll go back to the area where we were understanding how marine topography is formed. All right. So first of all, what is the mechanism of marine erosion? How the marine erosion takes place? So you have to understand, it depends on a lot of things. Of course, the nature of rocks. If my rocks are very hard, if my rocks are very hard and they are not very soft, if I have my coast which is made up of igneous rock, like my western coast, which is made up of igneous rocks because of the Deccan lava, then it will be difficult for my waves and my tides to cut down that area. So it is that. Then effect of tides and currents and human interference. Of course, human interference, if there is a lot of human activity, of course, breaking down of that area will take place faster. But for your exam, you have to understand these are the four processes which contribute for the erosion. These are corrosion, not corrosion, corrosion. It is an A. Corrosion is different, that is chemistry. So I have corrosion, I have attrition, I have hydraulic action, and I have solvent action. We'll take each term one by one. Now first I'll try to understand what is my corrosion and attrition activity. Corrosion is a mechanical process. It basically is that the rock debris, waves are armed with rock debris. Whenever my waves come, they are having rock debris. What are debris? I hope you understand what are debris. Debris is whatever is the broken material from a structure. Debris is used in your geography also. Also, whenever there is a building collapse, you know, so and so a person died while having debris on top of it. Yes, Devashish, you're right. Malwa also, as you call it in Hindi. So waves, they are armed with these rock debris and they break off cliff faces and slowly erode it. How? They simply, these debris, they collide with these cliff forces and they simply erode them. Now, what is the attrition? Attrition is when there is friction within the material in the waves. So the loose pieces of rock debris, all of these boulders, pebbles, shingles, fine sand, they collide with each other. They collide with each other, and this results in the attrition or breaking down of the material. So corrosion is when the rock debris, they collide with the cliffs. Remember those cliffs which I showed you, like this, or any structure which is any elevated structure which is found on the coastal area can be called as a cliff. So when they collide with them, the breaking down, it results in the corrosion, and within the wave, the loose particles, when they collide with each other, it is called attrition. Now, what is hydraulic action? Now, this is very interesting. And hydraulic action is, this is basically the main definition. The waves, they splash against the coast and they may enter the joints and the crevices of the rock. Suppose this is my entire rock, but then this is a joint here. There are two types of rocks uh, which came together. It can be a sedimentary rock system, so in which you have different types of rock layers. Whenever there is a joint, it is generally the weak point. So here when the waves come, it can create a pressure, and this the air can get trapped inside it because of the sheer pressure brought in by the waves. Now when these waves move backward and this pressure is released from it, it has a very explosive or blasting effect in this area, and because of that blasting effect, the rock system breaks from the joints. So this is basically my hydraulic action. If it gets repeated time to time, the whole structure tends to fall more rapidly. Solvent is mostly where there are limestones, the coasts which are having limestone. Remember karst topography? So the mechanism is the same, in which the chemical erosion of the rocks takes place, in which the calcium carbonate, it basically dissolves whenever the seawater, it surges within the coast. Now the most important thing is it should be a limestone coast. You find these a lot in the European coastal regions, where you find very beautiful coast of the Scotland. You find very beautiful coast of Britain. United Kingdom also has very beautiful coast, and a lot of them are limestone coast also. Of course, we read about the Adrian Sea. Did you go home and search the Adrian Sea? Could you find the Balkan state? No. Just watch this diagram very, uh, you know, see. We have to study this only when it comes to erosion. First step is the large crack is opened up by hydraulic action. This is the first stage. Remember hydraulic action, the joint and the water comes in, the pressure releases and the blasting effect. Second step is the crack grows into a cave by hydraulic action and abrasion. It keeps on, having a blasting effect here, thereby removing the rock structure and creating a cave. The cave is becoming bigger now. Then the cave breaks through the headland. Now this cave is becoming much bigger and forming a natural arch. Now this is a natural arch. This is a natural arc. In the fifth stage, this is getting much more eroded and the arch, it collapses. This now becomes like this. This is a separated structure from the rest of the rock structure. This is called a stack. This is called a stack. When the stack is reduced in height, it is called a stump. So it starts from here and ultimately results to here. Now you have to understand, basically, if this was the edge, if this was the edge of let's say my coast, then after reduction, now after it reaches here, my edge of the coast will become this and it will be part of the sea structure because it has been separated from the main rock. So this is how my erosion takes place. This we have done, the types of coast. This is the general definition of submergent and emergent course. You should know this, especially for your state PCS. If anyone is preparing for state PCS, they have this tendency to ask the difference between the different types of course. I have no idea why they're obsessed with this topic. But state PCS have these tendency. They pick up a topic and they keep on asking questions from them. So just a quick glance at what these are. Now you have to understand when do you find the submerged coast? It can be either because of the sinking of the land or due to the rise of the sea level. This is my submersion coast. Now either the land has sunk. Can anybody tell me in which case will I have the sinking of the land take place? Anybody? We are having a lot of debate these days going on. Climate change, right? My sea level will rise. If my sea level will rise, the land will sink and the water or the coastal area will be in much more interior regions. So that in these cases, I am having my zone of submergence. My zone of submergence is when the sinking of the land takes place. It can be generally due to climate change, or if there is a tectonic activity, as we have seen in our Western Ghats. When we were doing plate tectonic activities, thermal expansion of water, see, it is very difficult to have such huge expansion of water. Yeah, in the earlier stages, it is a theory that the thermal expansion of water also took place. But then currently we cannot say that it will be so high that the surrounding areas will sink because of that. I can also say that the sinking will take place whenever there is melting of ice post ice age. As you know, your earth undergoes a cycle of ice ages, right? I hope as a kid you have all seen those movies based on ice age. So there is an ice age and then there is melting of ice age when the new life again starts. So whenever there is the melting of the ice age, then also I have my zone of submergence. Third is of course the tectonic activities. As I was telling you, when we were doing the plate tectonic activity, I told you the Sahyadris or the Western Ghats are the result of tectonic down warping. Remember down warping, in which a part of the land it got submerged and the coastal area got much inundated and the zone of submergence or submergent coastal area got formed. So this is how my submergence coast is formed. You can read this for your notes, it is important. How the emergent coasts are formed? The emergent coasts are formed either by the upliftment of the land. Again, the land can be uplifted by the plate movement, or whenever there is an ice age. And there is another concept called river rejuvenation. River rejuvenation, which we will be doing when we will be taking major rivers of the world. So river rejuvenation is also a concept in which the upliftment of the land takes place. Your river Jhelum is believed to be such example of river rejuvenation. Also, the rivers on the western coast of USA are the example of river rejuvenation. So if you're taking down notes, just remember you have to, we'll be doing this when we'll be doing the major rivers, when we'll doing India part. So emergent coast is when the land is uplifted, can be by the plate tectonic or by the lowering of the sea. Now, by how the lowering of the sea level will take place? If there is an ice age, because there is a continuous ice age, the water will become ice, will be locked in the form of ice, and the overall, see, this is the expanded form of ice, so the overall area coverage of water will be less, and you will have the emergent coast. The most common is your, of course, your east coast of India. Tamil Nadu especially is the best example of coast of emergence. In west coast, as I was telling you, you have both. You have Malabar coast of Kerala, which is your coast of emergence, and your Konkan coast of Maharashtra, which is my coast of submergence. Though I have in between, I have beaches also in the western coast, but they are not as prominent as the cliff system of the Western Ghats. So I have my submergent coast and my emergent coast uh, present both in India for the example. Now, before proceeding, did you understand the difference between the two types of coast, so that I can move further? Now, this is another example how it takes place. You can go through this. This is exactly like the same in a more elaborate form. It is being provided here. Now, these are the erosional landforms which I have to study. This is the original headland. This was the original rock system. Right, this was the original rock system, and this becomes this over the time, as we had seen in the last slide also. What is a blowhole? Blowhole is that zone of weakness through which the water enters and then it starts oozing out. You find them a lot in Iceland region, you'll find them a lot in your Norway region, you'll find them in some cases in the Western Ghats also, though they are not that prominent in the Western Ghats because of the rock, which is igneous rock, and it is not very easy to break. This is a sea cave, this is an arch, this is a stack, and this is a stump. This is undercutting. Undercutting is when you start corroding the rock system from the interiors of it. Now, caves and bay topography. Caves and bay topography, which I told you, I'll be telling you. Caves and bay topography you find very prominently in South America and Africa. You find caves and bay topography. In fact, in every continent's edges, you'll find different caves. Now, first see the diagram, then we'll go through the. This is what happens. This is my original rock system. This is my sea. I have a resistant rock, or let's say strong rock, and I have a weak rock, soft rock. When the sea starts corroding it, the strong rock, which is difficult to corrode, stands out as a cape. And the weak rock, it gets corroded and the area gets inundated and forms a bay. This is basically my cape and bay topography. This you generally find in the submergent coasts. Generally, in submergent coasts you find this. So, if I have to give the definitions, then the capes and bays on exposed coasts, the continual action of waves on the rocks of varying resistance. The varying resistance is the hard and the soft rock, causes the coastlines to be eroded irregularly with the alternate band of soft and harder rocks. So this is my cape and bay. Now, what are my sea cliffs? This is my sea cliff. This is my sea cliff, and this is my wave cut platform. This is slowly and slowly, you have to understand, this was the original sea cliff. It got corroded, became like this. It got corroded and became like this. So this is the most widespread landform. It is generally very steep rock facing adjoining the coast. You'll find this if you've seen movies. If there was this very famous song of Shah Rukh Khan and Kajol, I don't remember the movie, in which there is a black mountain and black sand region. I'm sorry, I'm not that good at Hollywood stuff. So, but that I just remember that song because it had very beautiful cliff topography, which was shown to it. Very beautiful cliff topography. You find it even in the Scotland region, in which there is this very prominent cliff, and then there is this shore. And these, the problem is sometimes these cliffs are of this shape, and they are facing the danger of getting collapsed, but they are so beautiful, and they are known for, yeah, I've got answers from the students about the movie. I'm happy you remember the movies. I just hope you also remember the landforms which are associated with them. Bollywood has this habit of going to areas where there are beautiful beaches and mountains, so you can gather information there. Anyways, so these countries, Scotland and UK, are actually working in order to save these cliffs from falling down, because they are known for their tourism. They are known for their very beautiful, it is as if you're standing on the edge of the world and there is just open sea here. So these kind of structures are formed in the areas where there has been severe wave action. In India, you don't find them to be that prominent, again because of the rock structure. Uh, as you can see, the chalk cliffs of English Channel, you can actually, when the class ends, you can actually search them. They are very beautiful structures, so that it stays in your mind. Now, what are wave cut platforms? Simply when the base of the headland system gets corroded, it creates a wave cut platform. It is like a flat surface. This area, this is my wave cut platform. This is one such beach in which this is the wave cut platform, and these are the cliffs, and this is the cliff recession. So this cliff was originally at this position, and over the time it got corroded like this. Now, what are sea caves? As we were going through the erosional activity, we saw that once the blowholes or the weakening of the weak lines took place because of the hydraulic action, eventually it created sea caves. What are sea arches? Sea arches is when two caves approach one another from either side of the headland and unite, they form a bridge-like structure, like this, right? This is my arch. These are sea arches. What are sea stacks? As we had seen, sea stacks are comparatively bigger, like this, and these are sea stumps. These are all same thing. This is imagine this was the original position where this cliff system was. Over the time it got corroded, it got receded back, and these are the remains. So my sea stack and my stump are the final remains of my cliff system. Now, geos and blowholes, you do not have these diagrams in your NCRT, but for your mains, if there is a question on tidal or the marine landforms, you have to make these diagrams. So, therefore, I have included a diagram with every structure, because in geography, you have to understand one thing. If there is a question in mains, especially related to landform system, the more diagrams or the more pictorial representation you have more chances to have better marking from that. All right, so it is nothing. This is my cave. The water is moving here, and it is simply sprayed out. Over the time, when this area gets completely corroded, it gets converted into a geo. Now coming to the depositional landforms in the marine system. The most important is, of course, the beaches. Beaches is when the whole cliff gets reduced and the fine sand, mostly, see, not all beaches have sand in them. Not all beaches have sand in them, but generally most of the beaches have sand on their region. Then comes dunes. Dunes is just behind the beach. This area is just behind the beach. You can see this, right? These are the important structures which we have to see. So this is the coastal sand lifted and winnowed by the and they create different type of structures. Now these are the different kind of structures. This is a sand split. This region is called as sand split. This is all depositional features of a sand. The sand, and the most beautiful ones are found in Kerala, right? In Kerala, do we know about something called Vembanad? Have we heard of Vembanad? First of all, can anyone tell me what a lagoon is? This is here marked as lagoon. Can anyone tell me what actually could be a lagoon, and does having a lagoon have any benefits? Kerala has become a pioneer in telling the world that there can be rice cultivation under the sea. They do this rice cultivation in this region. Okay, I'm getting answers. Shallow water bodies between beach and deposit of sand, very good. Lagoons are very good for fishing, very good. Larger water bodies by barrier island or reefs, very good. This is also correct. You have to understand this lagoon, from here the rivers will also be coming. You have to understand the rivers will be coming here. So I'll have a fresh water supply and I'll have the marine water supply. Whenever there is mixing of two types of water, whenever there will be a mixing of two types of water, first of all, the fishing will be excellent. Second, these are comparatively shallow waters. So since these are comparatively shallow waters, okay, I have got a very good question, ma'am. What is the difference between lagoon and backwater? Can anybody tell me? Anyone from Alapi, Kerala, or from the areas where we have Alapi, Alapuzha is a district of Kerala which is known for backwaters. Anybody who can tell me what are backwaters? Anybody? Lagoon, I've gotten a lot of answers. What are lagoons? But what is the difference between a lagoon and a backwater? Are they one and the same, or there is any difference? Can I say that lagoon is nothing but an example of backwater? Okay, so I've got few answers from the students. They are saying that it has something got to do related to fresh water. All right. Backwater is water turned back in its course by an obstruction or opposing current. Very good. A backwater is a part of river in which there is little or no current. Okay. Now try to understand this. This is my India, right? This is my Kerala. Now Kerala, what is brackish water? See, brackish water is which is neither too salt, neither too fresh. The intermediate of salt and fresh water is your brackish water. Lakes are known very much for their brackish water tendency, the brackish water lakes. The most interesting one is your lake in Ladakh. What is the name of that famous lake in Ladakh where you have a lot of shooting and it's a tourist spot? That is a brackish water lake. Now tell me, what is brackish water doing up in the Himalayas? What is brackish water doing up in the Himalayas? You have Somorori Lake and you have Pangong So Lake, right? I think you know this. You have Somorori Lake and Pangong So Lake. Wular Lake, okay. Wular Lake is known for 2-3 reasons. Wular Lake will be doing, in fact, when I was doing the long profile of river also, then also the Wular Lake came. Is Wular Lake brackish water or fresh water? Anybody? Why do we have brackish water lakes in Himalayan region? Don't you think that in Himalayan region you should only be having fresh water, because either there are glaciers or there is a river water. There is no sea anywhere because of the it's no proximity towards the sea or the coast. Okay, I've got answer from one student. I want you to go home and think about it. Tushar, yes, your answer is correct. I want the other students also to go home. You have already done this, you just need to think a little harder. So we were doing backwaters and lagoons. Now, backwater and lagoon, you have to understand, I was telling you, this is my Kerala coast. My coast of Kerala does not have a lot of elevation. It does not have a lot of elevation, but it does not even form very major delta region. It does not form very major delta region because it is known for its wave action. So what happens is my rivers are not having a lot of slope and are not having a lot of, even the elevation or the speed. So because of this opposite current, this water is pushed back. This water is pushed back, and hence it is given the term as backwater. So whenever any course of channel is pushed back to its previous channel, you generally call them backwater. Kerala is known for its backwaters, and the district is Alappuzha, which is known for the backwater region. Now coming back to this, you have to see this is a tambolo. Tambolo is that connecting sand deposition. If this is an island, this island can either be of coral origin or it can also be a depositional island, and the neck which is connecting it to the mainland is called a tambolo. Barrier island, again I have this main region, then the water and the deposition is extensive here, creating into a barrier island. Okay, I've got this answer. Bodies of water of brackish lagoons. Yes, you gave me a good answer of brackish water. Then I have another students. Yes, a few students have got the answer of why we have brackish water in the Himalayan region. Other students also, it will help you in your test also. Anyways, so coming back, I have this lagoon. Lagoon is this small water body which is between the sand deposition, which can be a barrier island also. But I'm not calling this a lagoon because it has a very wide opening. This does not have a wide opening but has a comparatively narrow opening, and it is sort of an enclosed area. It is more enclosed environment. So these are important both for my fishing, for my agriculture also, especially by the state of Kerala, and for my tourism also, right? So these are my most important sand deposition. Now these are the definitions of it: bars, spits, and lagoons. Bars are when the gravel and all are laid down by the, which separates the shoreline from the sea. So I can call anything. This region can be called a bar. If there is a deposition like this, it can be called a bar. These are bars are also called as sandbars. In few books you will find them as sandbars. They basically act as a barrier between the mainland and the sea. Now what is a spit? End of such a bar. So this is end of such a bar, so this is a spit. Tambolo, as I have told, which connects. Then lagoon we have discussed. Chilka Lake, Pulicat lakes are very good examples of lagoon. Tell me, where is my Chilka Lake? Where is my Pulicat Lake? Are these lakes in Kerala or they are on the eastern coast? The eastern coast or Kerala? Chilka Lake is known for the conservation programs also. It is known for environmental, from the environmental point of view also. So Chilka Lake is in Odisha. Very good. And where do I find Pulicat Lake? Where do I find Pulicat Lake? Eastern coast, okay. It is not exactly in the Kerala region. These are in the eastern coast. So your homework for today is in the map marking. Today you have to go and see your map of India, and in your map of India you have to observe the coast. You have to simply observe the coast, and you have to tell me what are the important lakes on the coastal areas, both on the east as well as the west region. And when you see these coastal areas, over the time when we will be doing other topics also, we will start studying something called wetlands and how these coastal areas are important for their conservation programs. Okay, I'm getting a lot of answers. Chalo, good. A lot of students know about these lakes. I want you to map down all the lakes, and over the time we'll see that which lake is important for which. Okay. Now this basically concludes your marine landforms. Marine landforms are not very extensively given in your NCRTs. We have done, though we have done much more extensively. I want you to go through the previous year papers also, whether you are able to solve them by this information. And we'll proceed to our next topic, which is our arid landforms. Arid landforms are very important, especially for your, state PCS as well as your UPSC, both. Your UPSC also asks you, especially there is one landform called Barkhans and Playas. I have no idea. They are very obsessed with them. They keep asking the difference between them. So, arid basically means desert or desert-like. For layman language, arid is anything which is desert or desert-like. So, I have these three agents which result in the formation of arid landforms. It can be water eroded, it can be wind eroded, and it can be depositional. Now when I talk about water eroded, now just imagine for your better understanding, just imagine Rajasthan. So whenever I tell you about a process, just imagine if it is happening in Rajasthan and picturize whatever visuals you have seen from the state of Rajasthan. Now water eroded is when it has something to do with surface water, and the surface water is this: rill, gully. Now rill is in the hilly slopes of topology. A rill is a narrow and shallow channel which cuts into the soil by erosive action. So rill is nothing but a narrow channel of water which is not very extensive, which is not very wide, and when it does the simple cutting work. Now you have to understand, in the arid region, the erosion is very, very extensive. Why? Because of the lack of moisture, there is no binding between the soil. The soil is very loose. There is no binding between the soil. The soil is very loose, very, very loose. So there, its erosion and its depletion is very easy. By a simple blow of the wind, you can see when the wind blows uh, in general areas, let's say the North Indian plains, in Delhi or in whatever city you're living, you do not see that the entire topsoil cover starts moving with the soil. But if you are in Rajasthan, even with not that strong gush of air, you will find that the sand starts moving in the direction of the soil. Reason, it is not very strongly binded. And because there is no soil, there is no cover of vegetation, even the wind speed in these areas is very, very high, which again aids in the erosion activity. Now coming to the gully erosion. Gully erosion is basically running water. This running water can either be a river, this running water can either be even your rainwater. It can either be the two of us. So it is by the running water, and it creates large ditches or even sometimes small valleys because of that. Again, why? Because the soil is loosely bound and it gets eroded very, very easily. You do not create valleys by simple rainwater in the other areas, but in desert it is possible. Now ravines are the landforms which are narrower than the canyon. Remember Grand Canyon. Best example of ravine is Chambal. So what happens is, now I am having my soil which is loosely bound, There is no vegetation cover. Yes, a student is asking, more forest cover in these areas can help in preventing erosion of soil. Of course, the Chambal ravines, which are found in the states of Rajasthan, MP, and part of UP, it is a small area also known as Bundelkhand region. There is a plan by the government to increase the forest cover in this area so that the overall prevention of erosion can take place. Yes, it can help in preventing the erosion, but the question is, it will require a lot of water, and the problem in this area is lack of water resources. These are one of the poorest districts or poorest areas of the country, and it has very bad socioeconomic indicators. So of course it can be done again. Now coming back to the ravines, these are known for their badland topography, right? The Chambal ravines, which are also called as Bihar. Chambal was a very notorious region. There was a political leader also from this region who was basically a dacoit. And this region is known for its dacoit because it is very difficult to find them time to time. See, this is how they look. So just imagine it is something like karst topography. Remember in karst topography, whenever there is flow of a river or whenever there is rainfall, they used to change their structure. Same thing happens with this ravine. Suppose I have a map of this ravine now. There will be rainfall, and suppose this area will get cut, and I will have a passage from this area, and this area will fall down in this area, and this whole passage will be blocked. So I will have a complete different topography in this region. It keeps on shifting, it keeps on changing. So because of this constant shift and change with every season, it became very difficult for law and order to take care of the dacoits or the other non-law abiding elements in this region. So badland topography is when the gullies are developed by linear fluvial erosion. What is linear fluvial erosion? It is basically rainfall plus river water. Your Chambal is a permanent river. It has a huge volume of water. Does anyone know from where the Chambal originates? And is Chambal a tributary of Ganga river system? Now, okay, I've got an answer. Chambal does not originate from Rajasthan, beta. Chambal flows a lot. It has the major portion in Rajasthan. No, it is definitely not Odisha. Janapav Pahad of Madhya Pradesh. Yes. There is a region in Madhya Pradesh which is called Mahu. It is military headquarters of warfare. It is close to Indore. That is from where even your Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is from this place. It is a tributary of Yamuna, which is further tributary of Ganga system. So yes, so it originates from that region. Happy to know a lot of kids know that. Yes, yes, absolutely correct. So again, we keep on asking these questions so that you are more acquainted with your map from time to time. Yes, I've got some very good. It flows past Kota, of course. In Kota, it has major dams also. Kota is known for its power production. Kota is known for its dams. Apart from Cochin, there are other things also. And these dams are based on Chambal River system. Now, the bolsons, what are bolsons? This is within the intermontane basins. Bolsons are mostly you will find in USA. Remember the map of USA? In USA, my western coast was having desert and mountain both. If you have seen Hollywood movies or even in some Bollywood movies also, whenever the man travels towards Los Angeles or towards Hollywood or towards California, California is the district, Los Angeles is the city. So whenever you travel towards Los Angeles by road, you will find continuous stretch of desert. And that continuous stretch of desert is also accompanied by mountain system. So you will find this bolson, which is the type of character in the USA or the areas which are having mountains and deserts together. You'll find them there. Now, what are playas? Playas, nothing but the temporary lakes in this region. These are the temporary lakes. Now, these are pediment, bajadas, and playas. Now, what are these? Playa are these temporary lakes which are found, which is accumulated within this intermontane region. And after evaporation, the salt-covered playas are called salina. See, mostly the playas get their water through rainfall, and over the time, when this water gets evaporated, you get these salt pans. And these salt pans are also used for the production of salt in this region. Now, this is the diagram, or this is the picture that you have to keep in mind. This is all the erosional depositional features together. Now, alluvial fan, like this. Alluvial fan is nothing but the depositional area where I'm having the alluvial soil deposited, brought down by the rivers. As you can see, this is the rivers, they cut down these mountains and they flow from here. This is the plateau region. Now, what is a wadi? Wadi, you would have heard this word. Wadi is this region. So I am having elevated area here, elevated area here, and this depression is called a wadi. Now, what is a mesa? This is the original plateau. When this original plateau gets corroded to the extent that only such regions are left behind, they are called mesa. And buttes. This is my mesa and this is my butte. So this is stage 1, this is stage 2, and this is stage 3. This gets corroded to this stage, this gets corroded to this stage, and this further gets corroded into Inselberg, which are island mountains, or which are the only standing area. Now, what is a pediment? You have to understand pediments are like plains only. What are plains? Plains are the areas which are found on the foot. But the difference is pediment is formed due to erosion and plains are formed due to deposition. Otherwise, even plains are used for agriculture and the pediments are also used for agriculture. Also, the alluvial fan region is also used for agriculture. Salt pan palaya, which we studied, this area, when there is rainfall, it forms a temporary lake. When the water evaporates, I have a continuous stretch of salt pan in this region. Oasis, of course, the area where there is water aquifers. Now, these water aquifers is when the underground water, it comes up and forms a small lake kind of region. Barkhans are depositional. When the sand, it gets deposited in a particular fashion, which is in a crescent form, then it forms barkhans. We'll be having a detailed diagram of barkhans also. So this is basically the complete my arid topography in a nutshell. We'll be understanding the other uh, portions also of it. Pediment, as we have just discussed, which is at the foot. Pedi, always remember, pedi means foot. So at the foot of my plateau or the mountain or my Einselberg, I find my pediment. Bajadas have been asked in your exam. These are nothing but moderately sloping depositional plains. Now this is the depositional plane between the pediment and the palaya. Now let's get back. Where is my pediment? This is my pediment. This is my palaya. So in between, I'll have this depositional moderate slope, which will be called a bajada. So this slope will be called a bajada. Now, wind eroded, which are also called as aeolian erosion. Wind eroded landforms, which is through aeolian, is through deflation, abrasion, and attrition. What is deflation? Removing, lifting, carrying, which we generally know. The air, it carries the dust or the sand particles and blows it from one place to another. Abrasion is when the sand grains, they grind against its walls, is called abrasion or sand blasting, right? So when within the system there is a collision and further blasting within the system, then it is called abrasion. Attrition is wear and tear of the sand particles while they are being transported. So when the wind is transporting within that, the sand particles, when they collide with each other, they also break down each other. Now these are the different we saw few Zuben. You have to see these are nothing but when I'm having, this is my, let's say, structure. Wind is eroding it from this side continuously, then it can get converted into a mushroom rock. Why it gets converted into a mushroom rock? Because there are alternative layers of hard and soft rock. So suppose I'm having hard rock here, and I'm having soft rock here. So because of the wind movement, the soft rock will get completely corroded and this hard rock will remain standing. Same thing happens with Zeugans, same thing happens with Yardans, same things happen with Demoiselles. This is just the differences in their shape. Otherwise, it is nothing but the alternate hard rock, soft rock topography and the action of winds which results in this formation. So these are the definitions. We'll be going back to the pictures for better understanding of this. Mushroom rocks, as it goes by the name, it looks like a mushroom. Uh, what are Inselbergs? Inselbergs is an isolated hill. Remember here also, this is an Inselberg. This is an isolated hill. I do not have any other hill system along with that. Then Demoiselles. Demoiselles are like the pillars that stand as a resistant rocks above the soft rocks as the result of differential erosion. See here, this is the hard rock, this is the soft rock, this got corroded, this is still standing. Then I have Zeugans. Zeugans are more table shaped. These are more table shaped areas. Here, these are more table shaped areas. And Yardans. Yardans are formed parallel to the wind movement. So if my wind is moving like this, my yardans will have continuous formations like this. If ever you get a chance to visit Rajasthan, you'll find all of these. The most extensive is Sahara, where you find almost all such structures, but Thar also has majority of these structures which can be seen. Now these are the sand, this is from your NCRT only. These are the sand dunes. Barkhans are these crescent type shapes. Saif are which are only half crescent in nature. Then when it is parabolic in nature, it is like this. Transverse is the wind movement is in this direction. See, this is the direction of wind movement. And the sand dune formation is like this. And longitudinal when it is parallel to the wind direction. When it is perpendicular or not parallel to the wind direction, it is transverse, rest is longitudinal. These are the different definitions and the areas where you find uh, these different. See, these are crescent shaped, parabolic, these are U shaped, as you can see here. Star dunes, they have a high central peak and 3 to 4 arms. These are generally like this. You find in different areas. So it has a central high peak and then corresponding. Now this is what is important, especially in China. China has a Yellow River basin. How many of you have heard of Yellow River of China? Yellow River is one of the most important rivers of China and has a very extensive basin, and it is known for its loess deposits. Now, what are loess deposits? These are mineral-rich material. They are blown by the wind and we have extensive deposits throughout the area where the wind movement is there. Where do you find it? You find it in North China, you find it in the Missouri plains. Mississippi and Missouri are the two most important rivers of USA. Mississippi is the lengthiest river. Missouri is another very important river. So there you find these laws which are very mineral rich, which are very good for, extremely fertile for agriculture. And the state of Iowa of USA is, which is see, southern states of USA are known for agriculture. Northern states are generally known for industry. Not from today, since time immemorial. Even when there was the whole debate long back, when there was independence, when you will be doing world history, the whole debate of whether abolishing or keeping slavery, it was basically northern states versus southern states. The southern states wanted slavery to continue. Why? Because they were mostly agriculture based, so they wanted the slaves for their agriculture, while the northern states are more progressive and they wanted the abolition of slavery. So just when you will be doing your mapping also, it will help you. So in China you have the Yellow River region, which is also extremely fertile. It is known for these things. Now these are another depositional, a better diagram in which you can see this is how it looks from aerially, the different type of dunes. You find Barkhans extensively in Sahara, extensively. In Thar, you find a lot of parabolic dunes in which, you know, the other side is, these dunes are so extensive that you cannot see the other side very easily until you reach the top. वो जो कहावत है ऊंट किस करवट बैठता है वाला is probably related to this. These are your star dunes in which you have this extensive arm and then you have smaller arms. So these are your basic depositional and erosional features which are related to your coastal and your arid landforms. If you have any idea, any questions, any idea you want to share with regarding this, any problem you have with any other topic we have done previously, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll start with a new unit, which is my climatology. Do we have any problem with this area? Again, it is having a lot of terms, but it is very scoring. So please keep revising it, especially for your test. So if we are not having any problem, I'll just continue with my next topic, which is my climatology. Okay, there is a question about black water. Someone wants to understand black water. Okay. See, backwaters you will find in the, how many of you have heard of a city called Venice? I have two areas where I find backwaters. Why I was not purposefully telling you that it is freshwater region is because I have Venice also, which is related to sea backwater. Now just try to understand how backwaters work. All right. Venice is also a tourist spot in Europe, which is considered to be the most beautiful city. Austria. Is Venice in Austria? Does Austria have a coast? No, 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 no. Italy. All right. So from last 50 years, there is a campaign that Venice is getting submerged in water, that the Venice is going to drown eventually, that Venice will not survive the climate change. Yes. So I have to understand backwaters, I'll take two examples. I'll take Kerala and then I'll take Venice. Now, when it comes to Kerala, I have my rivers which are flowing towards the western coast. Now, the problem with my rivers is, when I talk about eastern coast, I have my emergent coast. So in my emergent coast, I have this very gentle slope. So my rivers have the liberty to form extensive deltas, which are formed by rivers of my Tamil Nadu, Odisha, and all the eastern coast rivers. The problem with my western coast river, especially the rivers of Kerala, is here because of the gentle slope, I have the liberty to form deltas. But here, since it is a submergent coast, and part of it is emergent, which we did in Kerala, but again it is not that gentler a slope that it can create proper delta system or extensive delta system as it is found in the eastern coast. Second thing, here the wave action is very, very strong. So my river here, when it is flowing towards the sea, it is not getting either slope, the slope is not very sharp as it is found in the submergent coast, which was with the case of Narmada, that the slope was high, that the river was directly falling in the uh, Arabian Sea and forming an estuary. Now here the slope is also not that high. In fact, it is having a very gentle slope, but because of the wave action, this river water is pushed back, and hence I have, you know, canal systems in Kerala in which you find that there are small boats which is used by the people of Kerala for general transportation also. So because of this pushing back, backwater is nothing but this pushing back. So I have fresh water backwater system generally. in Kerala because the river is being pushed back. When it comes to Venice, again, Venice, which is part of Italy, if you see, Italy is also the low-lying area. In Italy, it is the low-lying area, and because of the low-lying area, there is a stagnation of water in this region. And whenever there is, if this is my Venice, there is stagnation of water in this region, and whenever there is waves, there also you'll find, whenever you see the picture of Venice, you Google search Venice, you'll find there are multiple canals, or there are multiple small tributary canals, and you find small boats which are used for transportation. Reason, this water gets pushed back and it forms its wave. There is such gentle slope, or there is elevation difference is so strong that it is kind of stagnant water in this area, and whenever there is a wave system, this water gets pushed back into the land. So I can have backwaters both of the sea as well as the freshwater system. It is basically due to the lack of slope. And second, the wave action. They together combined create the backwaters. Am I clear? Does it make sense to everyone now? I think we are clear now about this. Lagoon is different from backwaters. Why? Because lagoon is pertaining to a particular area. If this is my beach, this is my deposition of sand, like this. And lagoon is this area, right? Between the beach and the sand deposition. Whereas my backwater is water moving back to the original coast in the my interior lands. All right. So I'll just proceed forward with the climatology. Is there any other doubt from the previous topics? All right. So I'll just proceed forward. Now, you tell me, why do you need to study climatology? Why do you need to study climatology? And what are the most important factors which decide the climate of a region? You tell me first this question, why we need to study, then what are the factors which decide the climate of the region, and based on this you tell me why Himachal Pradesh has different climate than Madhya Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. These are the three states I want you to compare, and I want you to tell me first this question, why do you have to study, and second is, by analyzing the factor, you have to tell me why these three regions have different type of climates. Okay, I've got one answer which says that climatology is important since it helps determine the future climate related issues. Okay, that is good. Latitudes, pressure, temperature, altitude. Okay. Scientific study of climates which is defined as the mean weather condition over a period of time. Yeah, you can say that. What is the difference between weather and climate? What is the difference between weather and climate? Is summer a climate or a weather? I got another answer from a student who's she's saying that it is because of the longitude and the latitude. So you are saying that Tamil Nadu and Madhya Pradesh have different climates because of the longitudes and latitudes. Do longitudes have any role? Do longitudes have any role? Okay, I got another answer. By identifying the thermal energy from the sun that is accessible to the region. Very good. So basically latitude is the thermal part. Weather is a condition of the atmosphere. Yes, I think a lot of people know what is the difference between weather and climate. You can say, in a layman term, I can say climate is the reason I plan my trip. Climate is the reason I plan my trip. Weather is the reason whether my trip will be good or bad. So if I'm traveling, let's say, to Marina Beach or the beaches of Chennai, I'm going there because I know there is a certain climate which is formed in that region. So that is the reason why, because it is the aggregators, the generalized, condition or the generalized weather of the area over the time. But weather can be uh, based on day to day or even hours to hours. You can have a different weather at a particular hour of the day. Yes, I got another answer that climate is the sum total of weather over a long period of time. Exactly. So this is more generalized, this is more day to day specific. So I am having right now monsoon, but that does not mean that every day I'll be having heavy showers. So every day or different variety of difference in the showers or the amount of rainfall is my weather. All right. The question is, now you tell me, why do I have different kind of climate in Himachal Pradesh compared to Madhya Pradesh and compare it to Tamil Nadu? Very good. I got another answer that agriculture is still an important sector, and therefore we need better understanding of climate to aid and support that sector. I got one answer that I have different type of climate in these regions because of the difference in latitudes. Okay, I understand. So one factor is my latitude. Keep telling me. Another I had got from somebody, mean sea level. Okay, difference from mean sea. So basically mean sea level, rather than writing mean sea level, I can say distance from sea to make it more easy. Okay, Bharti, what you're saying is the result of the climatic conditions, the vegetation part. Topography, of course, I can say they are having different climate because of the topography. That I will take. But vegetation is the result of climatology. Himachal and MP are landlocked. Very good. So distance from the sea part is covered here. What else can I say? Distance from the sea can also be written as continentality. How many of you understand continentality? Continentality is nothing but if I'm having this region, let's say Madhya Pradesh, which is very far from the sea. I got another answer which is altitude, very good. And this is my Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu will have the daily effect on its weather and climate because of its proximity to sea. There is something called sea breeze and land breeze which will act on it. We'll be doing that. Apart from that, you have to understand that the ocean or seas, they the water does not have the tendency to change its temperature very often. It takes a lot of time for the water to change its temperature, so it generally has a steady temperature. That also has the effect on this region, whereas the landlocked areas or the interior areas or continental areas, they get heated up very fast and they also cool down very fast, because compared to water, the land gets heated up very fast and get cool also very fast. This concept also we will be needing when we will be understanding the heat budget of earth, when we will be understanding heat budget of earth, and when we will be understanding the insolation, the concept of insolation, when we'll be doing climatology. So I'm having latitude. Latitude is basically what will be the solar action in that region. The role of sun and the solar action of the region will determine the climate of the region. Could we also say that the difference is due to variation in moisture due to atmospheric circulation or cycle? Atmospheric circulation, okay. Moisture, of course, moisture is the sum total or the effect of all of these. Yes, you can say that. That is the amount of rainfall that that area receives. Saying moisture is better because when you are close to a sea region or when you're close to a coastal region, you have a certain humidity level which is maintained in that area, and because of that certain humidity level, the overall temperature of that area is lower compared to the continental region. So if I'm having, okay, of course, I have another student who's saying that this is also the reason why we get moderate climate and heavy rainfall in the coastal region. This was exactly what I was trying to tell, what I was going to tell you further. I want you to, how many of you have been to coastal regions? If you've been to coastal regions, you will see that there is not much variation. The students who come to Delhi from the southern states, even from Hyderabad, let's say, who come from Hyderabad region or the Andhra region, or my Hyderabad is still in the interiors, or my coastal regions, mostly peninsular area, they have never witnessed cold or winters in their life. They have never witnessed winters in their life. They have never used, jackets. This is what they tell me, because they have never experienced such strong cold conditions which are there present in Delhi. The reason for that is this continentality. Delhi also have extensive summers because it gets heated up very fast, being in the interiors of the continent. Also, it has very strong winters because it gets cools very fast. All right, we have students who are telling us who are from south. Yes, absolutely correct. So I got a reason also why water molecules, there's a space between them, the heat occupies. Yes, from the physics point of view, it is right. So this is what we are going to start when we start our climatology. First, let us understand the role of latitudes and longitudes. Again, I am asking, do you think there is a role of longitudes? Achha, do we understand what are longitudes and latitudes? These are latitudes which are parallel to equator, and these are longitudes which are parallel to Greenwich Mean Time. Okay, which go north to south. I won't call them parallel. The longitudes are not parallel. Latitudes are parallel because longitudes are generally like this. If you see a globe, they have this kind of, so they are not exactly parallel. They go north to south. Again, my question is, do you think longitudes have any role in the climate of the place? Okay, give me an answer tomorrow or in the next class. Coming back to latitude. Latitude is nothing but the angular distance of a point on the Earth's surface measured in degrees from the center of the Earth. This. When I say 30° or this, I basically mean by this angle. When I say 66°, I mean this angle. All right. So my latitude is nothing but this angle from the center of the Earth. Now we'll try to understand this. This is, if you want, this is completely unnecessary. I just wrote it down because sometimes students want the formula about how we calculate miles and kilometers. While this will not be asked in your exam, not for exams, for your personal curiosity only. Okay, so coming back for something which can be asked in your exam, these are the important latitudes. Now you tell me, what is the role of Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn? Does India have Tropic of Cancer passing through it? Yes, we have Tropic of Cancer which passes through India. We have a lot of states through which my Tropic of Cancer passes, right? What is the role of Tropic of Cancer? Why this particular angle? What happens between 23.5 to north to 23.5 south? Sun, solar energy. My climate is nothing but the interplay of two major factors: temperature, moisture. My temperature and moisture, if I understand these two things, how the temperature has the effect and how my moisture has the effect, I can understand the entire climatology, right? These two, their interplay explains the latitude, altitude, distance from the sea, everything. So it is basically temperature and moisture. Also, I can say in a combined way, the overall humidity will determine the kind of climate that area will have. What is humidity? Humidity, can anyone explain me what is humidity? Very good. I got the very articulate answer about the Cancer and Capricorn. Humidity is nothing but the any but amount of moisture present in the air. Okay, the percentage of moisture refers to the presence of water vapor in the atmosphere. It is termed in either relative or absolute. Very good. You can study this chapter from G.C. Leong. Another my personal suggestion after you do NCRT, there is this book called G.C. Leong, which is Certificate to Physical Geography. It is a yellow book. I told you earlier also. It is very good for climatology and human geography. Again, this is my personal suggestion. You can download it in a PDF form. uh, its human geography and climatology is very good, very helpful for your UPSC and others exams also. So I was talking about my latitudes. Now these are the important latitudes. This is my equator, this is my tropic of Cancer, this is my 30 degree, this is my Arctic circle, which is frigid zone. My sunlight strikes directly from Tropic of Cancer to Tropic of Capricorn at any point of time. At any point of time, I will have direct sunlight in this region. Why? There is a video which I will be sending you in your group, which will be showing. See, the reason why 23, can anyone tell me why 23 and a half? What is the reason for this? Why does this region always have direct sunlight? Because of the tilt. Now this is, if this is my sun, I'll be sending you a video also so that you have better understanding. Uh, very good. I'll send you, it will help you in understanding even your satellite systems for your science and tech also. So if this is my sun, this is my earth, there is this tilt. Okay. This tilt, so this area is directly exposed. Now my earth is moving in the different, my pen is not working, is moving in different directions. Then also my areas between tropics will remain directly sunlit and will have the direct sunlight in this region. Now this is my torrid zone. Why is this my torrid zone? Because it receives direct heat throughout the year. This is my tropic of Cancer, and this is called my temperate zone, which is between my frigid also known as the cold zones. Now you have to understand there are two types of zonation when it comes to Earth. There are thermal zonations and there are mechanical zonations. The next topic which we will be doing is movement of winds, permanent winds systems which define the climate. And when we will be doing permanent wind systems, we have to understand the thermal as well as the mechanical pressure belts. Now in order to understand the thermal and mechanical pressure belts, how many of you have heard that there is a low pressure area and the high pressure area? Whenever in news there is a cyclone or something, they say the low pressure area is shifting towards so and so coast, which is intensifying the cyclones. We come across these terms. So what happens is whenever there is high temperature, with high temperature we have low pressure. So this is my permanent low pressure belt. Why is this my permanent low pressure belt? Because it is completely heated by sun throughout the year. Throughout the year, this area receives direct sunlight, which makes it a permanent high pressure belt. So this is my, permanent low pressure belt. Why? Because of the high temperature. And this is my permanent high pressure belt. This is my permanent high pressure belt. Why? Because this area you can see there is low angle of sunlight. You would have heard of it that in the poles you have 6 months of day and 6 months of night. For complete 6 months, when the sun is in the northern hemisphere, then you have 6 months of day in the Arctic region. While when the sun moves southern, or like these days when it is moving in the, it is traveling in the southern hemisphere, you have 6 months night in this region, or the twilight kind of situation is always present in this area. Why? Because it does not have direct incoming sunlight, which provides permanent high pressure. By whenever the temperature is low, the pressure will be high. High pressure is when the wind moves outside from the area. Whenever the wind moves outside from the area, it is called high pressure zone. The wind is moving outside. Whenever the temperature is high, the pressure is low. It is a low pressure area. In low pressure area, the wind moves towards the area. Now, for those students who are not from science background, in next class, we will be understanding what exactly happens in terms of expansion, that, because the air gets lighter after heating up, exactly. So do not get a lot nervous or anything. It is not very, very difficult, or it is not very complicated. It is very simple concept, right? It is basically whenever the temperature is high, anything, it starts expanding, including your air. So when my air starts expanding, it starts rising upwards, and it starts rising upward and moving. This also helps in my creation of clouds. Now, since this is rising upwards, it creates a vacuum in this area, and the surrounding areas, they act by filling this gap. You have to understand this is my upper atmospheric and this is my lower or ground reality. So when we will be doing climate, we have to understand that in any region, there is an upper atmospheric activity which is taking place, and on the ground, there is a different activity which is taking place. For every low pressure area on ground, I have a corresponding high pressure area in the upper atmosphere. Okay, in the upper atmosphere. If you don't understand this, don't worry, we'll be doing all of this again tomorrow. This is just a very general introduction about the zones. So far I have understood the latitude play a very important role, especially the latitudes between 23.5 degree north to south, which receives direct sunlight. Here I am having very high temperature and corresponding low pressure in the ground areas or in the continental areas. In the corresponding upper atmosphere, I am having high pressure area because the air gets light and starts moving upwards. Do African regions have evergreen forest? Are they known for their very dense jungles? True. Your African regions are known for their very dense jungles, while in these frigid zones, I hardly find any life, or I hardly find any vegetation. So when we'll be doing climatology goes hand in hand with my vegetation studies also. So keep these things in mind whenever you'll be doing. Okay, so I got a question, then why Western countries get tornadoes or hurricanes and we get cyclones in the Bay of Bengal? It is just the nomenclature. It is just the nomenclature. We call them cyclones, and in Western or USA basically calls it hurricanes. It is just the nomenclature. This is again very important topic in which we'll be studying how cyclones are formed. So I will not proceed further. I'll start with climatology as a fresh topic in the next class. So far, I want you to go through your NCERT so that you have a better understanding. The initial part of climatology is little, physics related, very little. And for that, I ask you, you have 3 to 4 days in your hand. till your next class, do read your GC Leong, Certificate to Physical Geography. It's a very good book along with your NCERT. And please prepare your geomorphology for the test. So I'll be concluding this class today. Thank you so much. If you have any doubts, do let me know in the next class.